no Great Depression. Our war is spiritual. Our depression is our lives. Chuck Palahniuk makes this grim observation of younger generations in his book Fight Club. We are sometimes referred to as Generation Me, those of us born in the 80s and 90s. We have the best education, the best technology, the best conveniences available to us. So what makes us different from our grandparents and great-grandparents? All of the books and movies portray that group of people born just before the Great Depression as heroes, strong men and women who never complained about the almost unbelievable ordeals of the Great Depression and World War II. In his best-selling book, Tom Brokaw named them the greatest generation. These ordinary men and women, people like my grandparents, have amazing life stories filled with stoicism, sacrifice, and a sense of purpose. And after listening to these stories all my life, I have chosen just 3 to illustrate a glimpse of the world that made them the greatest generation. My grandfather was born in a small town in southern Missouri in 1918. His father was an oil driller, and they lived in a primitive canvas tent house in the desolate oil fields of West Texas and Oklahoma. By the time he was in high school, it was the middle of the Great Depression, so he took whatever work he could get. One good job was tearing down an old abandoned nitroglycerin plant. Since the wood was soaked with nitro, he said, it was kind of tricky. We had to handle it carefully. He worked with nitroglycerin again, driving a nitro truck for an oil outfit. He used to talk about the near accident and the town that almost wasn't. Granddad saved up enough money to start college with 1 pair of pants, 2 shirts, and 1 jacket. A year after Pearl Harbor, he was drafted and out of college. Like most World War II veterans, Granddad never talked much about the war. But he did tell one story. He was with the 269th Combat Engineers, and their job was to clear the minefields so the tanks and infantry could get to the Battle of the Bulge. Well, one day, they were out on patrol, barreling along in their truck, when they pulled into a clearing, and there sat a bunch of Germans eating breakfast around the fire. Well, he said, I put the truck in neutral, and they all looked at us. We all looked at them. We sat there. I put the truck in reverse, backed out, and took off the way we came. I guess none of us wanted to die that day. It was a month later that Granddad stepped on a landmine, was blown against a tree, and filled full of shrapnel. He spent the next 4 months in Army hospitals, lucky to have his life and both arms and legs. For this, he was awarded the Purple Heart. Unlike my grandfather, my grandmother is a natural storyteller, filled with detailed memories of the Depression and the war, gangsters and the KKK, Irish immigrants, and famous people. But this next story deals with the type of stoicism that was common with the greatest generation. I met your grandfather at the theater bar in Terre Haute in 1944 when he was stationed nearby in Army Special Training. It was the beginning of a 60-year romance. We were married by Christmas, and I started following him from base to base. When we were in Riverside, he found out that we had 1 week to get to Hattiesburg, Mississippi for overseas deployment. So he and a buddy went out and bought a 1934 Nash with wooden floorboards so worn out you could look down and see the pavement going by. They strapped their duffel bags and 4 spare tires to the fenders, and we took off across the desert. By the time we got to New Mexico, we had worn out the last tire. So your grandfather sat by the side of the highway and cut boots from one of the old tires to patch them. Well, once we got to Hattiesburg, it was up to me to find off-base housing, which was really scarce. One so-called garage apartment behind a musty old house across a swampy yard. 2 walls were concrete blocks, but the other 2 were just cardboard boxes stapled together. It had a rusty iron bed, a cracked mirror, a small table, and a 2-burner gas stove. 1 light bulb hung from a wire on the ceiling, and water came from a spigot outside. For this, they wanted $35 a month, which was most of our salary. Well, my husband had been trying to keep the car from stalling, so once I got back out, he asked me what took me so long. My husband got the first beating of his adult life. I was so nervous, disgusted, discouraged, and I was expecting a baby any moment. After a cup of coffee and a piece of pie, we found a place in an old machine shop that was a little better. Within a few weeks, he was sent overseas, so my mother and sister drove down from Indiana. We put the baby in a laundry basket, got enough ration tickets for gas, and headed out back to California. We got as far as Dallas when the car broke down. I sold it to the car lot that would give me the most money for the tires, rented an apartment, and got a job there. In those days, people were used to their lives being temporary and uncertain. We didn't know what else there was. We certainly did not expect anyone to take care of us. We just did what we had to survive. My father's dad, Lyle Price, had a different type of surviving to deal with. As soon as we landed in Marseille in August of 1944, we started fighting our way up through France. We slept in ditches, barns, wherever we could. The trick was to keep your feet dry. If your socks got wet, you got athlete's foot and your toes rotted off. So we always kept an extra pair of socks in our uniforms to keep them dry. Somewhere in France, I got appendicitis, and it was bad, real bad. They took me to a field hospital, pulled out my appendix, and I was back on the front line within 2 weeks.
Wow.
My first dead soldier was a shock. We were marching through the Alps one night, and we saw a dead GI lying in a ditch by the side of the road. Every day was edgy. We were marching along one night, and it was stormy. It was always stormy. And we heard cannons, like thunder. Well, you sit on your helmet when you stop, and it was so dark I lost it. I had to get another one from some unlucky soul, but he didn't need it anymore. Well, we stopped and stayed there since it was so dark, and come dawn, we saw the Germans were 5 yards ahead of us. They had spent the night there too, just sitting in the dark. When we were in Austria, the war ended. It had been hell. The war changed us. I remember surviving a strafing run in the Black Forest by jumping behind trees. We thought it was a picnic at the time. One of those things you don't mind doing once, but never again. If I'd have known then what I know now, I would have taken notes. But you weren't worried about what would happen later in your life. Just get through the day. My Grandpa Price went on to finish veterinary school, get married, and have 4 kids. He didn't retire until he was 75. My other grandfather became a mechanical engineer. He worked on the Alaska Pipeline and the Apollo program. He also kept fixing his own cars and working hard until he died on his birthday in 2001. My grandmother and he raised 5 kids, put them all through college, law school, and medical school without much money. Grandma Mary is still telling her stories to everyone she meets as she travels about the country, and she just turned 90 last June. This generation of veterans and survivors of the Great Depression and World War II is dying. Every day we lose over 1,000 of these great men and women, these everyday heroes. They have stories that my generation could be learning from that are going unheard. Ronald Reagan once said that each generation goes further than the generation preceding it because it stands on the shoulders of that generation. Will my generation better listen and learn quickly before these people are gone? We could learn their honesty, their humility, their loyalty, their frugality, and their hard work. All the things that make them the greatest generation.